Hi, my name's Adam Backman. I think a lot of you know me. My voice is a little hoarse, but it's been a little hoarse for about 2 months. And I've gone to the doctor and they don't know what it is. So if I stop talking at some point and my lips are still moving, let me know. I'm going to talk about how your reliability is like Swiss cheese. And I came up with this idea a long time ago that sounded like a really good idea. And then I had to write it, and then it wasn't so much fun anymore. So the first 2 slides I actually have pictures of cheese on, which I really like. And then after that, it kind of goes downhill. So please, if you have any questions, or if you, just please stop me when I'm going. I'd rather answer them in context rather than answering it at the end. I'll answer questions at the end as well, but if you have anything when I'm going, please ask me. If anyone doesn't know who White Star is, we've been around for a while. We do stuff, mostly DBA stuff. I spend most of my life talking about reliability. I spend a lot of my life talking about performance, and I talk a lot about hardware. This presentation has a hardware element to it, and we'll talk briefly about hardware. My next presentation talks a lot about hardware, and it'll dig much deeper into what you can do on the hardware side to build a very reliable system. My next presentation is the first presentation on Friday morning after the gala event. None of you, including me, will remember it. So please get a copy of my email and ask me questions afterwards, because none of us is going to remember it. This is a better way of saying our goals and your goals are the same. We want to avoid phone calls for you. We want to make your life easier. That's really who White Star Software is. We're trying to make your life easier. And we have a product called Protop, which I'll give some shameless plug to in the middle of the presentation. But realistically, what we're trying to do with Protop is give you the tools to make you more effective. We're not trying to sell you services on top of that. We're not trying to, it's not a Trojan horse to get us into your environment. Really, we want to help you make yourselves very reliable. Okay, so what's the deal with Swiss cheese? Why did I start thinking about Swiss cheese? I was reading an article that was incredibly dry, and it did this analysis for me about why Swiss cheese is important. And so I liked the analogy, and I kind of ran with it. We're going to talk about merging theory and practice, because a lot of times that's a hard thing to do. You've got this idea of how it's going to work, and then you have a way that it actually works, and we'll talk about that. What makes a system reliable? And it's really, really simple, the things that make it reliable. Is the system available when people want it? Do they understand what your performance is going to look like? Those are the things that you're looking about reliability. People can depend on an outcome, and that's what you want to be able to supply to them. So a lot of this also talks about, we want to think about when we're building this reliability plan and when we're talking about buying new hardware, I don't want to talk about it in a vacuum with only the technical people. The business people need to be an integral part of everything you do. And if you don't do that, you're going to get punished downstream. And I'm not saying this as a random thing, it will happen 100% of the time. So you need to make sure that your business people understand what your goal is. And they need to be able to say, here's what our goal is, and make sure those two match. They're the ones who are going to supply you with the money. And if they don't trust you, they're going to pull back on that. And I always hear these people, it's like our budgets are getting cut, our budgets are getting smaller, or they're analyzing us. It's because you don't communicate. It's not because they're cheap. They're not cheap if you're going to meet their needs. They'll pay. But most of the time, we don't think to ask them. We'll give them what they want, or what we think they want. So what's the deal with Swiss cheese? When you look at this piece of cheese here, notice that you can see the background. Every plan that you have is going to have holes in it. Every single thing that you do is going to have holes in it. But when you add multiple plans together, it becomes a block of cheese. And then there's not a hole through the whole piece of cheese. If I don't block you at step 1 with my security plan, I'm going to block you at step 2. So I'm going to have things layered on top of each other. And that's the analogy I want you to bring away from this, is that it's not one piece. All of this reliability stuff is not one piece. It's a whole package. And you want to have the block of cheese where you have little holes in parts of your plan, and you will, no matter what. But if you put enough things in place, it's going to provide protection, reliability, and availability to your users. Merging theory and practice. Theory is when you know everything, but nothing works. Practice is when everything works, but nobody knows why. So what most people do is they want to merge the two and make sure that nothing's working and nobody knows why. Okay? This is like what people do. We're going to try to avoid this. Our job is to work against this premise. But this is how most plans are built. Is I have a theory about how it works, but I don't know that's going to work. And I know how it works, but I don't really know how it works. It's working, but I don't know how I got there. And a lot of this stuff is I've got a system that's been around and somebody else did the initial build. And no one's ever gone back and revisited what the idea was when they started. And it's become this monster that has stuff plugged onto the outside of it. Those plugs are trying to build the block of cheese. They're trying to make it so there's no holes. They found a hole, they patched that one. They found a hole, they patched that one. So what happens is, over time, you get this thing that's got a bunch of things glued to it. You want to go back at some point and start from scratch. And the best time to do it is when you're going to buy new hardware. And the reason for that is because that's your fresh start. Then I can think about, what do I want to put around it? How do I want to put the fence around it to make sure? Rob Straight talked about, we used to build a castle, then we built the castle with a moat, and then we built a castle on a hill with a moat, and we did all that stuff. Those things, that's how systems evolve, because the complexity evolves and the threats evolve. So we have to make sure that we cover both sides of this. What makes it? I want my system, my users want it to be available when they're there. They want it all the time. So if it can be available 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, they would be willing to sacrifice and take that. But you need to do other things like apply security patches where you may have to reboot the system. There's things still in progress where you have, or open edge, where you have to put the system down. You have to bring the system down and bring it back up. You want to go and put application changes in. Any of these things, you want to move to new hardware, there's going to be outages. So what you need to do is when you're doing that, you want to make sure that those events are predictable. Those events are scheduled and talked about with the users. The benefit you're getting from us doing this is this. So when I'm talking about an outage, I'm not talking just to the technical people, I'm talking to the business people and saying, is this okay? And they go, no, it's month end, we can't do it then. You have to do it 2 weeks later. Okay, fine, we'll do it 2 weeks later. Doesn't matter to you, you just got to fit their schedule. Performance is predictable. I don't mean good. Good is a relative term. Predictable is what you want. And I'd like it to be predictably good, but I'll take predictable. And the reason predictable is important is because it builds reliance. People understand what the system's going to cost them, what this event is going to cost me, and that makes it easier for them to plan. The system is secure, and Rob talked about all the stuff that Progress is doing about security, and everybody's thinking about their system and security. They think about these ransomware attacks that have happened, but you need to think about it practically, because the best system would be one that was completely locked down and nobody could log into it. It'd be secure. The problem is you can't do that because probably someone's going to want to log in. So we need to make sure that the system is secure, but it's secure in a reasonable way. and you're making trade-offs of security by allowing the first user in. That trade-off is something that you've done, and you've done with your eyes wide open. But make sure that everybody understands what you're doing. Data is protected both online and through backups, because if I can't recover my system if we have a catastrophic failure, then that's not a good thing. I live in Houston, Texas. Houston, Texas is called the Bayou City. Every time it rains there, I know why it's called the Bayou City. Because the underpasses, when you go under the highway, they fill up. They're like little swimming pools. And you see traffic is just dead stop because they can't go through the underpass to get to where they're going. And this happens multiple times a year. You would think maybe we could predict that and maybe we could do some drainage things. But we're not very low. My house is on nosebleed high ground. I'm up at 20 feet above sea level. But I never have water in my yard because I'm above everything else. So I've planned this. I know that water comes to Houston, and I've made a plan to avoid that. If the water comes up and hits my house, there's going to be a lot of other people who are mad first. So we're going to be there. So we want to make sure when we do backups, we want to make sure data is protected. So I want to use encryption on things. I want to use the data masking features with Progress to protect that data from internal threats and external threats. You have both. And I don't want to have my salary records exposed to every employee. That might cause a little bit of indigestion. So what we want to do is make sure that we mask that data properly. Complex. This is the article I read. It was in the New Yorker, and it says, the global networks, both physical, blah, 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 blah. What we're talking about here is things are getting more complex. Every bit of complexity we add to the system makes it more fragile. And we need to make sure that any decision we make to add complexity, we've already thought about reliability, and we've thought about predictability of that environment. So we've thought about that and security. So all these things are really, really important to us. Our number one goal with all this stuff is to avoid the unplanned outage. Understanding where you are right now allows you to understand where you're going in the future and where you've been in the past. So you need to understand how to do that. The best way to do this is I don't care about 5 nines at all. I just want the users to say, this system is reliable. If they say that, then I feel okay. I don't care about 5 nines. I don't care about any of that. Numbers, it doesn't matter. It matters if you have the hearts and minds of your user base. So buy the right stuff in the first place. And I'm talking a little bit about that today. I'll give an overview of how to do that. Monitor your databases, systems continuously, because I need to understand the data points of where we're going. Because if I see a trend where it's going up, I need to buy more hardware. If I see a trend where I'm filling up the disks, I need to buy more disk space, or I need to expand my database. I need to do these things in advance, because I can't magically make a disk appear on my system. It requires me to buy it. It requires someone to have the money and allow me to buy it. So there's a lead time there. So you need to know what your lead time is. Then you need to know how far you need to look at your data. Keep up to date with all of these software updates, because there's OS updates, there's progress updates. You may have an application vendor in there. All of that stuff, they're all putting in their security patches. They're all putting that in. If you're running an old version of Progress, and by old I mean 11, you need to be up to 12. And the reason you need to be up to 12 is because that's the stuff that Progress is fixing. You're not fixing 11. They're done. They say they're done April 1st of next year. Hooey, they're done now. They're not going to give you anything unless it's easy. Anything that's difficult, they're not going to do. Guarantee you. So, and one thing, you have to have a real tested recovery plan. And I say tested because tested is the operative word. Everybody says, I have a recovery plan. And I wrote a book a while ago Probably no one's read it, and that's okay. It was called Who Cares If You Have a Backup If You Can't Recover? And the reason I said that is because plenty of people, and we've heard this a million times, people call us up and they go, I have a backup, I just can't recover it. And it's like, what do you mean you have a backup? Well, we backed up the database. Okay, well, what's the problem? Well, we can restore the database, yeah, that's fine. But we don't have the version of progress, we don't have the operating system, we don't have the hardware, we don't understand anything about the process. So we don't know what we need to have to be able to restore the system. So that's critical, and people don't think about it. So when I do my backups, I think about backups as, what do I do daily? What do I do weekly? What do I do monthly? What do I do annually? And maybe the annually one is the one that I have to worry about, do I have the operating system? Do I have this? Do I have that? Monthly one, I probably want that too. Weekly, do I care? If I have last week's, I can restore it and get close enough. But monthly, I may have too many changes. I may have too many things that have changed on the system that I don't want to deal with. So make sure you have a plan for each of those different kind of backups. Okay, buy the right stuff in the first place. When you're buying hardware, you have to buy reliable storage, memory, CPU. You have to buy from a vendor who can support you where you are. I don't care if you go out and say, yeah, I bought Dell. They're great. Dell makes great hardware. But if they don't have a support arm in your country, they're not great for you. You need somebody who can support you where you are. Maintenance. When you buy your operating system, when you buy your hardware, buy every bit of maintenance you intend for that system right then. If you're going to keep that system 5 years, you buy 5 years of maintenance right when you buy it. You do it for two reasons. The first reason is it's much cheaper. You buy your maintenance contract in year 3, they're going to charge you as much as new hardware. So you can buy 5 years of maintenance, and it'll be the same cost as 3 years of maintenance, or 2 years of maintenance if you bought them year by year. So buy it all up front. The other thing is, the bean counters love this because that's a capital expense. It's not an operational expense. So it's a huge difference. And I know we're freaking DBAs. Why are we thinking about operational expenses versus, because I want more money. I want them to give me more money. And I can do that by making it easy for them. And that's what I'm trying to do. So when we talk about storage, if I need the absolute best performance, I want storage inside the box that I'm running. It'll be faster than lightning. The problem with that is I lose flexibility. And you get zealots up here who will say, and Tom Bascom's one of those zealots, I'll just rat him out right now, who will say, oh, fans are horrible, rah, 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 rah. And there's, he says that because he's a curmudgeon. And he's not a realist. He doesn't understand that the real world works on cost benefit. There's a cost to doing that. There's a performance cost. When you put a SAN in, just put it as close as you can. Use less wire. Don't have a big wind of wire out there, because every foot of that is another nanosecond that you lose. And this is the death by a billion pinpricks, because you're going to do a billion IOs over that thing every day. So you have to have everything, it has to be RAID. We're beyond that now. Everything has to be mirrored. Everything has to be. Do you want to use RAID 5? If you're using solid state disk, great. I'm okay with you using RAID 5. Before it was a complete can't do, because this rotating rust was so slow that I wasn't willing to pay 3 times for every write. Okay? Because on RAID 5 it has to write, it has to calculate parity, and then it has to write the parity. So it's all writing down one stream. It's much, but now that we're talking about tenths of milliseconds for access times, it doesn't really matter. You can keep up. The SANs buy you the ability to do better things with VMware, allow you to do better things with recovery, allow you to do better things in a lot of different ways. So they're a viable choice. Just make that choice intelligently with your eyes open. And understand that you're paying a performance penalty to do that. Memory. When you buy memory, buy the amount you need. Don't buy way too much, because that's what we see a lot of people doing now. Because memory's become less expensive. I won't say cheaper, but it's less expensive. And so buy what you need and use what you buy, okay? And then CPUs, this is where people make the most, they make the wrong choice the most times. Right now, if you buy a 2-socket system, it's most likely going to be NUMA. NUMA is non-uniform memory access. I wasn't going to get too much into the weeds, but basically, this CPU, this socket, is associated with a set of memory. This socket is associated with another set of memory. As long as I'm working within one set of memory and one CPU socket, I'm fine. But if I ever cross, so if I allocate enough memory to cross over, then I have what's called a far memory read. And that performance becomes very erratic, okay? And you don't notice it until you start scaling up, because it tries to do the best thing for you for a long time, and it works until it doesn't. And then fixing it when it doesn't is a pain in the neck. Maybe a little south of there. But, so NUMA, if you have NUMA, all is not lost. Just live within one NUMA node, and your performance will stay predictable. It won't become unpredictable because you have far memory reads. And with VMware, it allows you to set it up right in VMware, say, only use this node. So it makes it better. Fast and few beats slow and many. CPUs, when you go out there, you buy them, and you go, oh, that has 44 cores. Well, how many people are using 44 cores with their database system today? See the big raising of hands in the back. How many people use more than 9? 0. I will not need to be online, okay? She's just so nosy. So, but realistically, people are using 4. So if I can go out there and buy an 8-core system that has super fast cores, that's what I want to buy, because I can go way faster. Progress still has a bunch of stuff that's single-threaded, and it relies on one CPU being super fast. If I buy that, I can outperform everybody. So we go out there, we bought a system for a client. The client bought the system and then told us. That's usually a bad thing with us. We usually like them to call us and then buy the system, which we had one of those last week, and it was the best thing ever. But what happened was they bought a 4-node NUMA system. So now I've got 4 distinct pieces of hardware. But they said, we want to run on bare metal. And we said, we can do that. So we turned off 3 of the nodes in the BIOS, and we ran on one NUMA node. It ran really fast. This is after they had all the performance problems with all the nodes turned on. So they were like, well, we got all these CPUs. What? No, you don't. You got one set. That's what we're going to use. But we went, the performance on a non-NUMA system over the NUMA system was double. Not 10%, it was double. So really, really watch out for that. Oh no. Siri took over my system. Okay. You have to monitor. I don't care if you do it. I don't care if we do it. I don't care if you have somebody else do it. But you got to monitor. With the control center, Progress gives you some of that stuff. They'll give you more of it coming up, and that may become a viable option. It's not right now for me. But you could use MDBA. They're more of a services forward kind of environment, or you could use us. We're more of a tool forward kind of environment. What you want to do is you want to make sure that you're looking at all of these things, but you're also looking at the database stuff. And the reason you need to look at the database stuff in conjunction with the operating system stuff is you want to know the cause and effect. When I do this query, I can see this happen on the system. So it gives me that information that I need. It gives me the ability to know what the effect of this is. And you need to also monitor your virtualization. And this is where we see people fall down all the time. They go out there, they buy the system, it's got 44 CPUs. And they bought one socket with 44 CPUs on there. They go out there and they build 47 VMs on that, each using multiple CPUs. So they've overcommitted like crazy. And they wonder why performance is horrible. And we go in there and go, physics, they still work. It's like, you don't really have a better excuse for them. But they've been sold by the salesperson that says, yeah, throw them on, it's no problem. You can just do this forever. No, it's a limited pool of resources. You have to use what you have. So you have to be able to monitor that. And that becomes troublesome. So you need to really figure a way right when you get started on that to do that. We can help you with some of that. That's turbo. But you can gain near real-time access to what your system's running. We have a real-time system, real-time version of Protop. It's free. You can download it, you can use it, it's free. We think of it as a gateway drug. You use it, and then all of a sudden you become addicted to having information. And then you're going to want to have our portal product. So I'm being truth in advertising here is we're trying to bait you in with our gateway drug. But I would highly encourage you use our gateway drug and try it. You might even find a way of taking the same information with your own code and just using us to reverse engineer your own stuff. That's fine. We're cool with that. We've spent 20 years building this thing. It's going to take a while for you to reverse engineer it. But ultimately, we want you to monitor all the time. And we want you to capture the data and be able to get this done. And ultimately, we want you to be successful. Okay. The thing with monitoring, it allows you to move into this proactive mode. Now I'm proactively looking at things rather than having to react to problems that are coming in. I always want to be proactive. I can say, oh, I need to buy disks in 2 months. I need to do this in 3 months. I can make a plan and I can show the business data to support that. And that's what they really like. Because every non-technical person in there thinks all you want to do is buy the propeller hat to be able to go out and buy the neatest whizzy thing. And that's as far from the truth as possible. You just want people to stop talking to you. I want people to stop talking to me as well. So if I buy reliable stuff, they don't call me. It's way better. Okay, be able to answer the what changed. Because this is the question we will ask you very first when you call to ask for support. We'll say, what changed? And you're going to say, oh. And that's the answer we usually get. Protop and products like that allow you to have this historical information and compare it with current information and then make intelligent choices. And that's what you want to be. Keep track of the software schema changes, all that stuff you do someplace as well, because you're going to say, you didn't notice something for a couple weeks. Then all of a sudden you look at the graphs and you're like, what happened here? And you'll go, well, I don't know what we did on December 23rd. Well, it was like, and it turns out you put a software change in. That software change adversely affected a query, and that made things much worse. But you didn't do it because you had so much hardware, you were good about buying good hardware, the stuff just ran. And it's not going to hurt until it hurts. The problem is, I need to be able to figure out when it came so I can get rid of it. So that's important. And correlate OS and virtualization if you can. Protop takes care of the OS and open edge. We don't take care of virtualization. And I don't know of anybody who does. But you can correlate our data with the VMware information and get going that way. But it's important to correlate that information. This is kind of what the portal looks like here, but the rubber hitting the road is more of this, where I can see a trend. I can see this. And we had a big battle when we first built this product. I'm a business guy. I'm a big picture guy. Tom is a numbers cruncher. And we wrote this, and the very first version of this, these were scatter charts. Because these line charts are not mathematically correct. Okay? And I had loud words to say about that because I don't think like a scatter chart. I think like a line chart. Most people do. In reality, each of these events aren't linked together. We're only linking them together to let you see a trend more effectively. But here we have the connections, but we can also correlate that with this BOGO MIPS. I can also correlate that with response times. I can also correlate that with DB reads, DB writes, hit ratio, all at the same time. So I can look at all those events and see how they affect each other. And that's the magic of it, is being able to see correlation of data. Okay, turn off salesperson. Okay, managing planned outages. I talked a little bit, schedule in advance. I want to know when we're doing this. The business needs to know when we're doing this. I have a client that it costs them $10,000 to be down for 1 second. Each additional minute only costs $1,000. So when we have an outage, the minimum time we go out is an hour. So that's $70,000 that we're spending to shut the system down. We know that. That's okay. But we work with all the technical and business people to say, here's what we're doing, here's why we're doing it, here's when we're doing it. They want to tell everything. I want to make sure that I've done this a dry run one time, so I've tested and timed everything, and then I pad my timings by about 10% to make sure that I have a little bit of wiggle room. Because you always want to under-promise, over-deliver. If you come up a half hour early, no one complains. You come up a minute late, you are on the spike, and they will come get you. They come with the flaming torches to your office. Provide predictable, not good, predictable performance. And I really, you can't stress this enough. I want things to take the same amount of time every day. So this report takes 10 minutes. That's okay. It takes 10 minutes. But if it takes 10 minutes one day, and it takes 20 minutes the next day, and it takes 5 minutes the next day, they don't trust you. So you need to be trusted. So make sure that it's predictable. Month end and mid-month should look exactly the same. You're not scaling if month end looks horrible. You've gone and done something wrong. And it might be your application code's horrible. And that's exactly okay. What you do is you go back and you look at all the application code and you start, this is the worst thing, let's fix that one first. This is the next worst thing, let's fix that one second. So we go through and methodically stamp down those bad actors. And that's what we got to do. And we want to make sure this monitoring and buying right makes this easy. If I'm monitoring, I can find out if the month end, my request rate is 4 million a second the whole day. Or I can see if it's so much radically different. And then I can start digging down and figuring out why. But without the data, you can't. Secure your system, everything you need to get the updates. Get the updates for your stupid routers. Please. I update the routers at my house every time they're available. I have automatic updates turned on. And I get an email that says, do you want to apply this? And I can just respond to the email and say yes. And then my routers install the update. So I have the control over it still, but it's not a lot. I really don't want to have a lot of control. I want these things to come in and be applied. You know, I usually read the release notes, kind of skim them. I want to feel like, you know, it doesn't say, well, this could fry your entire system. You know, it's, I won't put that one in. So have realistic password and security rules. I've gone in and people have these things you have to have. Can't be a word, can't be a thing. You got to have upper, lowercase, special character. You have to have your mother's maiden name in there, in reverse, and you have to have those other stuff. And you're like going, what do you do when you do that? You write it down. So I know how to get on these people who have the most difficult password rules, I know how to get every password in the system. I walk up and I pick up the desk blotter, and there's invariably a Post-it note with that stuck on there. So realistic means realistic, meaning people can apply them but not be crazy. Okay, upper, lower, special character, great. Not a word in your language, that's okay. But allow people to use compound words or phrases or whatever, it's okay. Okay, I want to make access to my system convenient so people will use it. So that's the big thing, is I don't want, but I do want to make sure it's controlled. I want to make sure I know who's logged in, and I do want to make sure that I can monitor it. So if I have a problem downstream, I can look at it. So I need to make sure that all of those things take place. And some of them are at cross purposes. So what do I need to encrypt to put on my backup? Because I don't want my backup going off site with everybody's social security numbers in it. Because the person who loses their social security isn't liable. I am. In the United States, I'm liable for losing their social security number. And it costs companies billions. So don't mess around with big government. Protect your data. You got to develop and test. And I like to go step by step through the process, documenting everything. Then I go step by step through the process, automating everything. Then I go step by step through the process, recovering everything. Then I go step by step through the process, allowing the stupidest person in your environment to do the restore. So what you do is you get your boss and you bring them over and they do the restore. If they can do a restore, Zippy the Wonder Chimp can do a restore. That's what you want to have. When do you do your backups and what do you back up? So I have daily, weekly, monthly, all that stuff. I'm going to have all this stuff I need to back up. And the operating system, do I need to back that up every day? Probably not. If I do an update, I definitely need to back up my operating system. If I do something different, I need to do that. Applications, do I need to back up progress every day? No, I probably don't. So I want to make sure that I can recover, but I also want to make sure that my backup is reasonable size and reasonable duration. Progress has gotten way better about its backup times. In 12, if you're running 11 and you go to 12, you're going to say the backup didn't happen. It's that fast. It's so much faster. So this yearly one is really, really important, because if you get audited, you're not going to get audited this year. You're going to get audited 4 years from now. In the United States, I'm going to get audited 6 years from now. Do you know what your system looked like 6 years ago? I don't remember what I had for breakfast this morning. So how am I going to remember what I had? So you have to have a document that shows what your system looked like and how to rebuild it. It's going to be hard, but it's okay to be hard as long as it's possible. It just can't be hard and impossible. So all these things, make sure you remember these user files. Users depend on like the reports. They report down, they put it on disk, and then they print it out. They rely on being able to look back at that stuff. And when the first time you restore and you don't put the user files back, you will hear about it forever. So that's just a huge trust thing. Make the process automatic and make it so a moron can do it. Okay? Focus on the recovery aspect. Don't worry about so much. I don't care if you have a backup. If you can't restore it, it doesn't matter. Okay? Make sure that anyone can do it, and make sure and you know how long it takes you. Because what's going to happen is you're going to have this critical point at a failure that's going to be, do we try to recover or do we restore from backup? And the only metric they care about is how much each one cost them in time. If you don't know, you don't have an answer to that question. You need to know. Okay? Maintenance, annual backups, archives. You need for potential audit, you need to have all the stuff for it. So you need to make it, and you need to have a document that shows what the system looked like at that point. We're running progress X, we're doing this, we're on this version of the operating system, blah, 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 blah. Okay? If you've got ancillary applications, you need to have those as well. So it's a very complex thing. This year-end backup is absolutely critical. And this year, there was a big thing in the paper, and it was an organization, they got audited. They had a great backup. They had everything documented. They had everything they possibly need, except for the stupid tape drive that they could put the tapes in. They had to go and find one, and they couldn't find one on the secondary market because it was that old. So it was an 8-year-old or something like that, and they couldn't find one. And they would just put out this frantic call, does anyone have this tape drive? And somebody helped them, but it was like they had to just basically admit to the world, we can't restore. And that's a miserable place to be. Archiving backups, where do they go? Do you have a professional Iron Mountain system or something that you can send stuff off-site? But you need to know how long it takes to get it back. You need to know the process for getting it back. You need to know who the person can request that back. You need to have a backup for that person. So it's not dead dumb simple. If you put this at someone's personal address and they go on vacation, you need to be able to have access to their house when they're on vacation. I'm saying this because it's real. I've seen it. So I don't care if you put it at someone's house. I really don't. You just need to have access to it when they're not there. Because the only time you'll fail is when they're not there. It's 100%. I had a client we did this huge recovery plan for. And we went through and we documented everything. We ground through everything. The first time they failed was the guy who I built the plan with. So I built the plan with him, we documented, but we automated everything. He went, just follow the document, and hung up. And they did. And it all restored. The next time he went on vacation, it failed again. They didn't call him that time. It worked like magic, but it was because they knew how to do it. It made it super easy. So I feel goosebumps now with that story for me, because that's what I want. I want it to just be automatic. It just works. So they used to always talk about telephones, because we don't have telephones anymore that are wired to the telephone grid. We all have, these phones that work as long as we're not standing under a cloud or something. But you'd pick up a phone and there'd be a dial tone. And it's reliable like the phones. And phones were just dead dumb reliable. And that's what I want your system to be, just dead dumb reliable. So when do they get there? Do you just push your stuff to an offsite? You need to, if you're just pushing it to another node on your system, which plenty of people do, you still need to get it off-site at some point. Because if you have a security failure, they're going to attack everything. And it's on the same network, it's going to be just as dead. So make sure you get it off-site all the time. So it has to be on something removable. I don't care if you remove a disk, that's fine too. Whatever you can do to removable media, it has to be removable and archivable. So back there. It also has to be labeled properly. And don't label it with the backup command, because the first thing people are going to type is the backup command. And they're going to back up right over your backup. Okay? How do I get them back? I need to have 24-hour access to anything I have, all the time. And I need quick turnaround. So if I'm putting it at someone's house, they need to be the guy who's closest to the office. If I'm putting it at Iron Mountain, they need to give me a ETA of how long it's going to take me from the time I pick up the phone to the time I have a tape in my hand or disc or whatever in my hand. I need to know that. Okay, and how long does it take to restore? So, this is another one, which was this guy, he did this talk. I might need a hobby, I'm thinking. I read all this geek stuff. So, they respond to this. Their complexity, their flexibility, this is the key thing here, and their systematic redundancy, all of which build the resilience, okay? I have to have, it's gonna be complex. We're already complex, but we have to be flexible in what we do. And we have to be able to rethink decisions we've made in the past. Do those decisions still make sense? Because if you don't revisit those things, they tend to come and bite you. We need to be flexible. One time we went to disk. Next time we go to tape. This time we go to something else. Don't know. But we have to be redundant. All of which make this, that's what makes you successful. So flexibility. What flexibility allows you to do is do something based on cost. And this is going to make the bean counters of the world jump up and down with glee that you actually thought about this. But you tell them, if we do it this way, it costs this much. If we do it this way, it costs this much. The difference between those two is this one will restore in 20 minutes, this one will restore in 20 hours. Which one do you want? They make the decision, you don't care. You document what they said. If they say the 20-hour one, you know who owns that 20-hour decision? They do. You don't. Make the trade-offs for them. Staffing, who can recover? I need to make sure that I have a primary and a backup, and those people, they can't vacation together, ever. Can't drive to work together. Okay, no single point of failure. Personnel, no single point of failure on your hardware, no single point of failure anywhere. Networks, disks, everything have to be redundant. And if you don't have that redundancy, I went in years ago and I was doing an opening of a casino. And I walked in there and it was just a wire jungle. There was no walls. So all the wires were pulled. And I came in to do an advanced look at what they had. And they had one fiber drop down to every fiber drop. And I went, that can't be. There needs to be 2 more wires there. And they went, 2 more? I said, you got the live one, you got the backup, and you have a redundant. And the redundant can be redundant or for growth. So you have a way of doing that. They had to pull 2 miles of wire. And they're paying $10 a foot for 2 miles of wire. So that's 3 kilometers of wire that they pulled. And I just came in there and went, oh, they need to do that. And the guy goes, do you know how much that is? I go, I know exactly how much it is. Should have pulled it the first time because it would have cost them 10 extra cents per foot. That's it, for 2 extra pulls. So that's important. Options are good. You want to have options and show them to the bean counters. You want to show them to the users and allow them to help make the decision about what's right. Know what the trade-offs are and tell them. And then replication or restore from backup and use AI. I might not be able to afford a replication license, but AI is provided free. So that at least gives me a way to get up to the latest transaction, and the cost is greater recovery time. But that's okay. I want to be able to do that. Why is all this important? The stuff you have on your system is what keeps the business in business. And even if your primary concern is selling widgets, you still need to know who you're selling them to and when they bought the last one so you can sell them more of them. So it's really important. The risks are getting worse because people are now ransoming. You can go and thank God for software as a service. I can buy hacking as a service now. I can have someone log into your system and I just pay for the one hack. I don't have to have my whole school of hackers out there doing it. So that's real, and that happens today. The cost of downtime, hassle, monetary, and reputational. How bad is the reputation of that company who had to put out in the national press that they didn't have a tape drive to restore their system? Their reputation is crap. And if they're an investment company or something like that, people are going to take their investments and move them someplace else. If they didn't think about that, they're the idiots, not me. So really, really important. This is hugely important. Reliability relies on layers, okay? The layers that you're looking at is system performance. Reliability of your operating environment, the hardware that you buy, the software that you have and maintain. So all of that, protecting the data, making sure that you have protected data when it's on the system, but also when it's not on the system, that you've made intelligent choices. Securing the data, securing everything. I have to secure when I send it off site. Is it important that there's stuff encrypted on there? Yep, for me it's social security numbers. I know that one's got to go right away. But there's other reasons to have to secure the data. Having the ability to restore in a timely fashion, that's why I back up to hardware and then take the stuff and put it on tape or some removable media. So I can do a hardware to hardware restore for most of the cases. The one case that they get both systems or something like that, then I still have my ace in the hole where I have my one extra backup out there. All of this needs to be communicated with technical and non-technical people. Everybody needs to know, and you need to do it now. Don't do it when something bad happens. It's too late, because they already think you're an idiot. Questions?
How do you practically see to test the recovery of your backup in an?
How do I test my backup strategy? Well, in the ideal world, you have a second system, and what you do is you restore to that second system. In the non-ideal world, you build a second environment parallel to your primary environment and you restore. You do not restore over your production system, because I've had people do that and that's caused the problem. So we want to make sure they were trying to do the right thing, they just did it the wrong way. So you're not going to restore over production. You're either going to build a parallel environment and restore that way. That requires you to be more intelligent, because now you have to remember everything has to be relative path named. Okay? When you get everything back up, you also need to make sure you can start everything up, that app servers start, that admin server starts, all that stuff that you have out there, all that goo you have out there, all has to work. And being in a separate location, that may be hard. That's going to be more difficult. So having a secondary system, even if that system isn't as capable as your primary system, a lot of times I say just buy the storage and buy the cheapest CPUs you can buy. That allows me to restore, I could test everything, and I don't care about performance. And if I had to, in the worst case scenario, I could restore to that machine and run the critical portion of my system, not the whole system. And that would be good enough to limp along to have people answer your phones and still take orders. That's what's important, is I want to look to the outside world like nothing ever happened, even though people are running around with their hair on fire. You know, I want to make sure. So, any other questions, comments, personal problems? Okay. My personal problem is, hi, I'm Adam, and I need a hobby. So, thank you very much.